Presentation from the Sleepy Hollow Local Development Corporation, who are required from time to time to come in and report to the trustees on their activities and on their finances. So we're looking forward to that report. And
Great.
Take it away, sir.
Mr. Mayor, trustees, thanks. Mike Dolly, I'm from the LDC, and I've got a few members of the broader team here with me. Anthony Scarpati, another board member and treasurer. Dan Breyer from WSP, our engineering firm. David Smith, who you all know. We've also got David Weiss, who's not going to be presenting today. I think he's leaving that to Dan. We've got Jenny Nolan, who's working on our funding plan. So I think what we're going to do today is just go through the financials first. Anthony will do that, and then we'll discuss briefly what's been accomplished in the first 12 months via Phase 1, which just kind of wrapped up this week. We'll also talk about what's coming for the next 12 months, and we will also discuss some of the ideas around 193 Beekman, the UAW building, and then Jenny will give a brief overview of our funding plan. Shouldn't take more than 30 minutes, and we'll leave time for questions. Just to give a brief...
Mike, center that.
Yeah, got it.
You have a wonderful speaking voice, and we want to make sure everybody gets to hear
Right, right. Actually, why don't we jump right over to the financials and have Anthony run through
You
those?
too
and
have a wonderful speaking voice.
we'll talk about the project after he's finished.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and trustees. My name is Anthony Scarpati. I'm on the LDC board and the treasurer. This evening, I've distributed earlier the financial statements, the recent audit done by our external auditors, and dated May 2019. We thank the village staff, Joan Pucci and Anthony Giacchio, Sarah as well, treasurer, for assisting and coordinating the audit. They did a very good job, very thorough job. We appreciated that, certainly. So I'm just going to go brief through a few of the pages, talk about some of the things that happened, and if you have any questions, you can stop me. As you know, the biggest development was that we went out and raised a $10 million bond from Signature Bank. And that is the biggest move on our financial statements, of course. To date, as of this report, we used about $3.1 million of that, which increased our development costs. Our development cost total went from 1.5 to 4.6. You'll also notice that on the balance sheet, I don't know if anybody's following. If you want me to talk about pages, I will, but otherwise I'm just going to go through it. On the balance sheet, we are sitting with, as of, again, May 2019, cash in the amount of $6.9 million. Excuse me, can we follow you on the screen? Do you have the pages? I do have pages. Do you have it? The access so that we can see them as well as the public? I distributed the financials to you, so I'm not sure if you guys have them keyed up on there.
Email form, I don't have it in front of me.
What page are you on?
I'm on page 7.
7, okay. I have it here, I can show it to Glenn.
I'm not sure, actually.
Can you see
I'm
it?
not connected to the last.
This is page 7.
If we had it up there, it'd be great, but if we can't, we can't.
Yeah, I don't have control of that. So.
The financials will go on the website.
Yeah. So again, I'm perusing through the balance sheet. As I indicated, as of May, we have, we're on page 7, Glenn.
Thank you.
As of May 31st, 2019, we have approximately $6.9 million. Obviously, we've started Phase 1 and moving into Phase 2, so that's what the overall $10 million note is for and ready to accomplish. The significance of the cash, a portion of that cash, $1.1 million, is sitting there as an interest reserve, which, as by design, is set to allow for payment of the debt obligation, which is interest and some amortization, for about 4 years. And that's one of the things the village and the LDC planned for. So it kind of does not burden the village at this point from a cash necessity for the interest and amortization. So that's a significant item on the balance sheet. Going to page 8, not much to speak about. The revenue that we would collect from the village as licensing fees has decreased. Again, that was by design, in that the village, the debt finance that we put together enabled the LDC to utilize funds for certain costs, professional fees, and the further development of the east parcel. So although our expenses are up and our revenue is down, again, a lot of that's been managed with the debt. You'll notice the big items on the profit and loss statement, or the statement of activities, I should say, on page 8, is the interest expense of $225,000. Again, that came out of the interest reserve, and the bond issuance costs of $239,000, which also came out of the total proceeds of $10 million. The LDC was in compliance with all matters that it was supposed to be at this point. We have some overall government compliance obligations as a municipal quasi, or an organization that's run and owned by the village. But we met our investment requirements as pointed out in our examination. And we also continue to operate at this point with the cash flow on hand. Yeah, and on page 17, Glenn, it's a little point, but EFPR Group, the CPAs, they indicate that we've complied with all material respects with sections 201.3 during the year ended, and this is a significant item for us as a municipality. So again, the audit went well. We've accomplished, I think, a major task as a village and as an LDC board to raise the $10 million and to begin the phase. And the financial audit went well, again, with the assistance of the village. And I think, we'll continue along that path.
Thank you.
We're going to have continuing reports on the activity. Any questions on the finances? Or if any occur to you, we can always come back to Mr.
Yeah.
Scarpati.
I'm gonna need a little bit of time to digest this, so I may be reaching out to you at some
Anytime.
point. Thank you very
Certainly.
much.
Mr. Dolly?
I'll briefly go through kind of what we've done to date. As you may recall, the first phase of the project was really to bring in fill, our objective being to get as much free fill as possible. It's quite amazing how much free fill there is out there. So we set up an infrastructure to be able to take it in, inspect it, and assure that it passes muster with all the EPA requirements. We did that. We started and learned that we needed to replace sewer lines and water lines. So we did that. That was really phase 1A, and as you can see from these pictures, there was quite a bit of activity down there. If you didn't see it, you missed it, because all those pilings have been driven into the ground, and they're all smoothed over, but at this point. That was a big project that took the better part of this year. They just completed that project, so the sewers are in and operational, and the water lines are in and operational. So that's kind of phase 1A. What we're doing as of today is bringing in more fill. Year to date, or life to date, we brought in about 30,000 yards. We've got probably another 60,000 that we'll probably take in by the end of the year. there's approximately 40 to 50 trucks coming in a day right now over the last week, depositing their fill, running through our process. We've got people down there who monitor the whole process. For the entire project, we're thinking it's going to be 150, 175,000 yards of fill. And that's all to raise up the area where the DPW will be built. That's kind of phase 2, phase 3. And that project is really what's going to be happening in the next 12 months. And Dan's going to talk to that a bit, but it's an interesting process. If you go to the next slide, I think it is. So these are wick drains. So these things are all, there's going to be thousands of these laid down, and it's really to pull out the moisture and the water from this property and assure that when we put fill on top of all those drains, it flattens out and it's
Expedites the settlement.
durable to be able to build on it. We have to raise it many, many feet. What is the total we're actually raising the property?
It's, I mean, on average, we're
17?
going, no, probably closer to 12 feet on average.
Yeah.
Above the existing grade.
That's after it's compressed,
After it's compressed.
right? So it's a lot of fill to get it to the right height or altitude that we need it to be at. So this is really something that's going to happen over the next 12 months. We've got this project out for bid. We're waiting for all of the bidders to come in. I think November 20th is the closing date now for bidders. There's probably 8 or 9 firms that do this kind of work. This is a part of the original financing that we got from Signature Bank. So that's kind of phase 2. That's going to be a long project. Not super exciting, but it's important to get that area prepped for the DPW build once that comes along. With that, I would also just say that, you know, to give a quick timeline before I turn it over to Dan, this is pretty much all of 2020. There'll also be an opportunity to build roads throughout the area, a couple other items too, which you want to reference those real quick, Dan, the other things we'll do in 2020?
Yeah, so part of, phase 1B really is going to be the construction portion of the project that happens over the next 12 months through 2020. On the other, you know, parallel to that, we're going to be advancing the design of phases 2 and 3, which ultimately will allow us to relocate, or break ground on, and then ultimately relocate the DPW facility. So some of the other items, major scopes of work in phase 2 would be a stormwater corridor that runs the entire length of the site, pretty much between the east and west parcel along the Metro-North Railroad tracks. The roadway network that supports that DPW facility, extension coming down from Continental, and then extending out a new roadway, A, as it's being called now, that ultimately ties into where the former viaduct roadway went out and connected to Beekman. The drainage network that would support that roadway system and DPW facility, as well as some improvements to the Picantico buffer and some trails. That there are some items of work early on in the project that the public would see some, you know, benefit and use from. And outside of that's phase 2, phase 3 is solely the completing the design and construction of the DPW facility.
Yeah, so there's quite a bit of work that can be done while we're waiting for the ground to settle in 2020, but I think another important thing that Dan just referenced is we've got to design the DPW in order to get that going and be ready to go in early 2021. You know, and of course, you all recall that that's a part of the longer-term plan. We need to monetize the old DPW site to help pay for some of the projects, so that's kind of it.
I was just going to say, just add as a follow-up, that phase 3 would require a site plan approval from the planning board. So when Dan mentions the preparation of those plans, there's going to be continual coordination with other village agencies and boards as part of that process, so there'll be continual coordination.
Questions on?
Any sense when you might have something that you can show us in terms of timing as far as design goes? Meaning, when do you feel like you'll have a pretty good idea in terms of the specs, how large it's going to be?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, there has been some preliminary work done on what the ultimate DPW site might look like. I think, you know, we're gonna have to think about, or you guys are gonna have to think about the budget for the site, but, yeah, we want to get going on that. That's kind of a 2020 project where we'll start to get firms designing various structures that might fit our needs. So I would expect maybe Q1, early Q2 of 2020, we'll have something for you.
And I think there's going to be a lot of guidance on that from this board. In the end, it's our DPW facility. In the end, we are paying for it, so we got to make sure that we get all the pieces that we need. I know WSP can be very helpful and has been very helpful in doing some of the block design kind of stuff. This is what a DPW facility should have or what it looks like, but ultimately it's going to have to be one that we think is properly tailored for our future needs here in the village. So a big part of that, certainly the final design, is going to be something that's going to get pushed by us with your professional expertise helping to guide that.
Mike, roadway A, I just had a question. I think you brought up the fact that it could be utilized. Have you given any thought to maybe getting that as a utility road for all this fill coming in, just to alleviate some of the stuff going on in Continental Street? Is that feasible, or?
Which road, John?
It's the road from Clinton down.
Oh, yeah,
They call
yeah.
it roadway A.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've definitely discussed that being an option. It's not ready right now.
Right.
But that's going to be a critical entry point, not only for the delivery of fill, but on a go forward. So I think everyone's aware of the fact that the idea would be to bring Clinton down. But yeah, if we could get something done sooner, I mean, look, the fill is going to keep coming. It's amazing
Right.
how many trucks are needed to get to the 150,000+ yards we need, so.
And I'm not sure that's a better solution. There's a lot going on Beekman Avenue right now.
Yeah, but
I
at
just
least it
thought of it like-
divvies it up, yeah. It would
just
be
to
great. I
split
think
it
it'd be
up.
very helpful if we had Continental available, or Clinton
If
available
there's anything
also.
you need from us, maybe we could talk more about it, you know.
Yeah, we can touch on that a bit when we talk
We'll
about
get to that as part of our,
193,
yeah,
193, yeah. Other questions?
So is it reasonable to think that sometime the second half of 2021, or maybe it's the first half of 2022, that we'll have a completed site?
I'm expecting 2021,
Well, the completed
end of
site-
year.
In other words, where our DPW will function out of that site?
Yeah, I think the timeline for that, if everything continues to progress, you know, according to, you know, a very aggressive schedule, would be by probably Q1, Q2 of 2022. Because construction of the DPW facility itself would not really be able to start until the very tail end, optimistically, of next year. So you gotta give, you know, another 9 months to a year to actually construct that facility and get everything relocated, so.
That's probably I mean, we would want to push it as quickly as possible, and I think the structures we've looked at to date are pretty modular, and they're not super complex, so I would expect they could go up quickly. At least that's what we're going to try and do, so.
I would just jump in and say also that part of the timing is affected by the grant process, because as I'll talk about in a few minutes, the DPW, relocation of the DPW site is something that we've applied for money for, and so nothing can happen on that until, I
Right.
think it's June of 2020, actual, the designs can happen, but not any construction anyway, so we're at least limited by that. If we get the funding, which we will.
So obviously, this timing impacts what we do with the existing site.
Exactly.
And,
That's why,
that's gonna help pay for it. So, as that becomes, clearer to all of us, we'll have a much better idea of how aggressive we can be with the existing site. And, hopefully, there's not too much dead time in between.
yeah. Well, look, collectively, between the trustees, the mayor, and the LDC, and a host of others, 2020 is going to be a busy year, scoping all of that out, because we also have to determine what our financing needs are going to be. We've got, we're paid through kind of phase 1, right? 1A and 1B.
More or less, yeah, I think.
Yeah, so we're gonna need funding for phase 2 and phase 3. And 2020 is a perfect time while we're waiting for the wick drains to settle and drain, to figure all that out, so we can be ready to go when the site's ready.
Have you had any interest in the UAW building as far as projects, potential opportunities to?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I
Dave's
know
gonna
that
touch
also
on
ties
that a
into our
bit.
zoning and.
Yeah, I mean, look,
as
we
well.
learned a few things
Right.
about what it takes to pique interest in
Right.
that from a developer standpoint. So David's going to talk
Okay.
to that a bit, and so is Dan. But yeah, that's another component of the future funding that we had in our original plan. Any other questions on last 12 months or the next 12 months?
I just want to say thank you to the whole board, whoever's here and not here, for all the hard work and diligence, and especially the reporting that you've given us tonight. Obviously, a lot of work goes into it, and
Thanks.
we appreciate it.
I'd also like to give a shout out to David Trodell, who's under
Yeah.
the weather today, and he's just provided an enormous amount of value to the project. He wished he could be here, but he's ill, so speedy recovery to him. With that, why don't we, should we move over to 193, guys?
So as Mike indicated, the LDC purchased the UAW property, which is at 193 Beekman. I'm sure you're all familiar with the site. And the LDC also owns the adjacent parcel, which is the viaduct parcel. Late last year, in 2018, they went out to the development community to get some expressions of interest for the redevelopment. There was, as Mike indicated, there was a limited response to that request. So the LDC went back and evaluated how to better pique the interest of the development community. And in part, this is based on some of the recent work by other communities like the city of New Rochelle, who underwent a kind of a zoning and environmental review for portions of their downtown and have helped spark significant developer interest in properties and redevelopment in that community. So they've kind of taken a kind of a similar approach where they've evaluated the development potential for both the UAW and the viaduct property. And this is a kind of an interesting case because the viaduct property has certain restrictions with respect to land use because it was formerly a GM property, and when it was transferred to the village through to the LDC, those limitations, particularly no residential development, no retail development, could occur on that particular property, but it doesn't preclude the development of the UAW property, which was a separate piece. So as the LDC went through this exercise, and Dan, if you could put up the diagrams that you have indicate development potential, understanding that you're limiting the development just to the UAW property, understanding how you can accommodate a development program. The conceptual level plans have approximately 2,100 square feet of street front retail. If you see on the lower left, that has a street front retail component. And then they've taken a conservative approach and they've evaluated how many residential units you could get to create a mixed-use building. And depending on the size of the units, you could get anywhere between 31 to, I think we had 45 residential units. Okay, and then it's in a 4-story building. On the 4th floor, again, it was contemplated because once you get up that high, the views are spectacular. They're they're unbelievable. And so the opportunity there is to perhaps create a mixed use where you've got a restaurant at this top level that creates a signature element to this particular property. There are certain limitations with respect to the site. How do you accommodate parking? Because it's very limited. So Dan and WSP prepared parking diagrams, circulation diagrams. And I want to point out that we provided these plans, conceptual level plans, to the building department to get their initial feedback. And they provided some significant input on the overall design, particularly with respect to circulation. So we're trying to be inclusive of the various elements within the village that would eventually, these plans would come before. So the limitation really is with respect to the site geometry is you can only accommodate approximately 54 parking spaces. So it's really not, when you look at the building program as conceptually laid out, doesn't quite match what you have in your zoning code. So that presents somewhat of a limitation. But I think as your ongoing planning process with respect to your comprehensive plan and your LWRP, you talk about things like transit-oriented development because you've got access, fairly convenient access to mass transit, whether that's Westchester County Beeline or certainly Metro North, that you can think about development in a different way that's more responsive to kind of more contemporary planning standards. So I think this was a very useful exercise to get the LDC and to get the village much more aware and to provide to the development community what the actual potential development program could be for this site. Because now a developer can weigh and balance the kind of the costs for development and what their return on investment would be based on kind of this initial conceptual level planning. So as part of the process, the LDC, in conjunction with understanding where the village was going, prepared or had this office prepare a draft of a floating zone. And I believe that Professor John Nolan was here a few weeks ago and went through in detail the kind of the planning concepts behind the floating zone and how it could be applied within the village of Sleepy Hollow and how it could be applied in specific instances. I had the opportunity to speak with John in depth last week, and the draft that you had initially seen was modified based on his comments and his review, so that I understand that you have a resolution on for later on this evening to consider that as a concept. So I think part of the benefit of and the value add of having the LDC is that they've been able to prepare kind of an implementation program for developing the UAW and the viaduct property so that you could actually get it back on the tax rolls, put it into the stream of commerce, and help start to generate some additional activity in that part of the village. And Dan, if we could just go to, I think, the last slide, because I'm going to transition to Jenny's. So I think this is a really important graphic because it starts to show the vision that the village has had for a number of years. In particular, you have 193 Beekman Avenue. John, I think you had mentioned the roadway extension. So that is a portion that's a little bit complicated because you've got topography. We're thinking that a portion of the UAW property, not the viaduct parcel, would actually contain the road and the road bed because the grades are more accommodating to have it in that way. And again, that helps bring and tie in this whole concept of creating the east parcel of Sleepy Hollow Common and connecting that very important element of the village to basically the southern part of the Village of Sleepy Hollow. In addition, you've got all of the activity on the west parcel. In the blue boxes, the blue shaded boxes, you have activity. Your townhomes are starting to go up. The I-block buildings, which are along the railroad, the Metro North Railroad tracks, my understanding is they've got their foundation construction has already started. The building permits for the E-block, which are the condominiums, has been initiated. And right now, you had a recent announcement that Heinz Development Team is going to begin, they're preparing their building permit applications for the F block, which is the kind of the darker shade. And so you've got activity on the west parcel. You've got, I think somebody had mentioned about the existing, Glenn, maybe you had mentioned about the existing DPW. So that's in that red shade. So now all of a sudden, as the east parcel, Sleepy Hollow Commons, begins to become more finalized, and we talked about that timeline where the DPW could be relocated. This floating zone concept, which could be applied to 193B, can also be applied to the DPW parcel and help initiate some of that additional development, because that's really kind of the next piece in the dominoes, if you will. As the DPW gets relocated, that becomes an extremely valuable piece of property for the village, just because of its location, the views. It becomes a real linchpin in helping to kind of finish off or provide a completing component to the development in that part of the village. So that's a quick rundown of where the LDC has gone from with respect to 193 Beekman, kind of the vision. And then I want to just turn over the last part of the conversation to Jenny Nolan, who's going to talk about some of the great things that she's done on behalf of the village when getting some additional funding to make all this happen. Jenny.
David, any questions at this point?
No, the only thing I would suggest is a recommendation to consult our consultant for parking that's been working with us, and I think just another pair of eyes would be helpful.
Who are you using for?
Uh,
Send me the information. Yeah, okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Ms.
Hi,
Nolan?
everyone. So I'm just going to close up the discussion by talking a little bit about what we've done over the past year with fundraising. The LDC has raised over $2.2 million total in four different pots of funding. The first one you see up there is the $1.58 million grant received from ESD specifically for the groundwork, ground improvements, and a whole bunch of other items in phase 2 for the Sleepy Hollow Commons site. And then the other 3 grant awards that were received are all a part of, some overlap with the Commons, and it's all a part of the coordinated effort to restore the shoreline of the Canogo and link the recreational opportunities from DeVries through the Commons site. So we received those 4 awards in the past year. As part of the $1.58 million, we also received priority project status from the Mid-Hudson Regional Economic Development Council, which was a very big deal. We were excited about that, and so we got the highest number of points awarded under the Regional Council review process, which was very exciting. And we have 2 grants that are pending. The decisions are pending for this year, and with those grants, we do already know that we received priority project status again, which is very exciting, so bodes well for those grants. So right now we have also $2.25 million pending in funding, $250,000 under the recreational trails program, which is federal funds that flow through the state, and then $2 million we've requested under from DEC under their Climate Smart Communities program, and that money would be for the relocation of the DPW facility. It's very difficult typically to get that kind of thing funded by the state, because relocating your own public works facility is not the kind of thing they usually want to get state funding for. But luckily this year the Climate Smart Communities program did have an opportunity, because the DPW site is climate threatened. We were able to make that argument that with the site improvements that are happening on the Commons, we're going to improve that and improve, increase the efficiency of emergency services during storm events and all that. So hopefully we've made a good argument, and we will get some funding there. Over the past year, we have also focused on creating a fundraising plan that we're still developing, but it'll take us, hopefully over the next 5 years. And as part of that, we're also looking this year to start our strategy for obtaining federal funds, hopefully. That will be a part of the process. And we have a few federal options that we've been evaluating and working with different people to explore those funds. And we will also be going for state funds again, as we have in the past. And as we go farther down this road, you have to have money to make money. So we'll see. We have to phase our applications with money that we're bringing in. So we'll hopefully the UAW project goes fast, and so we have to have matching funds for all of these grants that we're applying for. So we have an ambitious plan ahead of us, and hopefully we'll be able to keep rolling it out every year.
So far, everything's synced up well as far as our projects and the timing for some of these grants, so. And I think we're all excited about the opportunity on the federal side, too. Some of our projects are rounding errors in the federal budget, so hopefully we can tap into that resource, especially for things like if we're going to build a bridge over the tracks at Continental. That's a big spend, so it'd be very beneficial to have federal funds help us there.
Yeah, we've been speaking with DOT, potentially some of the build money we would apply for that, and also been looking into the FEMA grants for work on the common site.
Jenny, are there any other things we could be doing as a village to apply for grants and have an enhancement maybe in our application? Like there was one, it came up last week in our meeting, clean energy community. If we become that, then we can apply for grants with a little bit more strength. Are there any things that, off the top of your head, you can think of that we could be doing on our end to, better our chances for receiving a grant? And you don't have to give me the answer tonight, but.
I will think, but I will say
Right.
you have also, the Clean Energy Communities is one of them.
Right.
And also, you have already taken the Climate Smart Communities Pledge, which is
Right.
what made you eligible for us to apply for the Climate Smart Communities money,
Right.
so that was good.
Mhm.
So you've done that, so that opens the door there. And then, as we go, we'll have to look ahead for the grants that we want to apply for, which is why the fundraising plan element is so important. And we'll have to look ahead to see what doors need to open. Mostly, it's going to be, as we go down the line, it's going to be the matching funds. So we need to figure out how to line those up ahead of time. But yeah, I will let you know
Yeah,
if
if
there
you
are other
could
ones.
just let us know, because we've been talking a lot about it as a board, and grant opportunities are really important to us. So.
Yeah, definitely.
Great.
Matching
what-
funds would be a good problem to have.
Yeah.
One other thing I'd just like to stress is the importance of getting 193 Beekman in shape to present to developers. I think that's really important because it's such a important component in this whole project. So the sooner we can develop that and present it to developers as an attractive investment opportunity, the better. But also keep in mind, I just wanted to remind you, we've come up with some interesting designs, but ultimately you guys and the planning board will determine what goes up there. We just want to set it up with optionality, so there's a lot of things for you to look at once the developers start coming in.
It might be worthwhile having a commercial real estate broker, agent, who's in that marketplace right now, dealing with investors, knows what's hot, knows what people are looking for, to get some information as we think about what our options are, so that we can get the most value we can possibly get for that square footage.
Right.
And its location. Because trends change, and we're seeing that on the west parcel, where At one point, rentals didn't seem as interesting as luxury condos. Now rentals are seeming very interesting.
Right.
And that just happened in the last year and a half, 2 years. So I would like to have the most up-to-date, sort of industry trending for properties like that, as far as, where you're getting the most bang for your buck.
Yep, makes sense. One other post, just on the same topic, kind of, just so you all know, you may already know, we have had several meetings with the IDA in Mount Pleasant, just to make sure we're in that loop and we get an understanding of how they operate and what they might be able to contribute to any project that might advance.
That would be great. I heard there was some positive feedback.
Yep, there were.
I would also say that, to your question before, that the work that this board and the LDC have been doing already, and how fast and efficiently and collaboratively you've been approving and, coordinating everything, is actually something that's significant for state funding, because the state does not want to give money, especially a large chunk of money like what they've given us, to a village that is going to be sort of bogged down in the politics and can't move the project forward and all that stuff. So just the reputation that you've created is really important for getting the state funds. So as long as we keep moving the project forward and showing them that we can do it, and it can happen as we promised, then
That helped us get the high status for the next 2019 grants.
that opens doors in and of itself.
Well, as was noted earlier, I think by Mr. Scarpati, we do have a resolution on, for this evening, to notice for a public hearing for the floating zone. So we'll be a couple weeks out before, I'm assuming that resolution will pass. But we will be opening a public hearing on that in a couple of weeks. And I'm sure you're going to follow that with interest. And we look forward to that process being completed, and hopefully it's something that will be able to complement this project. It's also, I think, worth noting that it's kind of what you're doing right now with the UAW, where I should start calling it 193. With the 193, Beekman is potentially a dry run for the DPW site, of putting together the project, sort of doing the secret process and everything ahead of time, and so that it's more, it's not turnkey, but it's easier for a developer to come in and know exactly what they can do, and not have any of those, the big ifs that are normally around a particular site. So it'll be really interesting to see how this one turns out. Any further questions for anybody on the presenting team tonight?
Can we get a copy of the presentation?
Sure. No problem.
Thank you,
Yes,
ladies
thanks very
and
much.
gentlemen.
Thanks.
Appreciate everything you're doing.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we've got a warrant, which was distributed earlier.
I downloaded.
For the record, the warrant is $671,164.31. Any questions on the warrant?
We have to wait for Sam.
Email it.
Can't vote without him.
We're not.
Well, then somebody raise a
here.
question on the warrant. Was there a question for me?
No, sir.
No, not yet. While you're doing that, are there going to be any amendments to the minutes? Because we can at least raise those. Nay.
forward on the minutes?
Yeah, all right,
I was
Alright.
absent for a couple, but.
go. Let's,
Move to approve the minutes of October 29th.
is there a second?
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed or abstentions?
Abstain?
Please note the abstention for the record for Mr. Levy.
You may want to,
Huh?
you may want to, after Mr. Gonzalez is here, you may want to vote on that again.
Do you want to withdraw your motion?
I'm withdrawing the motion.
Okay.
I'm going to
Second.
reintroduce it.
The minutes of the
Last week.
October 29th. So move adoption.
to adopt the minutes of October 29th.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions?
Abstain.
Please note the abstention for the record.
Motion to approve minutes of November 5th, 2019.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed or abstentions? Minutes are approved.
And motion to approve the minutes of September 24th, 2019.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions?
Abstain.
Please note the abstention for the record. Okay, that takes care of the minutes. Let's return to the warrant. And as I was saying earlier, it's more of a medium-sized one for us. It's $671,000. Any questions on the warrant?
I had a question that Mr. Giacchio clarified may be worth sharing with everybody else. Anyone who's looked at this? On
Please.
page 25, Historic Hudson Valley, there's a voucher for $75,000 for the Phillips Manor Bridge and Wharf. And I learned that this is a pass-through for a grant that we had to apply for them, since we're a municipality and they're not. And so that's what that's for. Sort of popped off the page when I saw it.
Was not us subsidizing Horseman Hollow.
Correct.
Motion to approve the warrant.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any further comments or discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? And the warrant is approved. Next item is my announcements. I'm just say be careful. This is the first really kind of cold night of the year. But also note for folks that are in the Pecanico Street, Continental Street area, Route 9, as was noted during the LDC presentation earlier this evening. In this meeting, we're moving in a lot of clean fill into the east parcel, and so there's going to be a lot of activity on Continental Street, which is mean on Pecanico Street as well. So those are large dump trucks, and just be aware of that. Keep that in mind as you go forward. It's going to go on for quite a while. I'll move on to the administrator's report. Mr. Giacchio.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a little before this meeting, Trustee Levy and Trustee Gonzalez and I,
Oh, I'm sorry. I did have one other announcement.
which can wait, my report. can
Yeah,
wait.
you can wait. I'm pulling rank. You will recall, members of this board will recall that we approved a training course for business owners, small business owners here in Sleepy Hollow a few months ago with a nonprofit group called Community Capital. that came in and provided training courses for small business owners or people who wanted to start a small business. And the first course was just completed this week, and in the business owners, I think there were 10 total, graduated this evening. Our congratulations to them. The course was conducted in Spanish. It was a number of our smaller businesses in our downtown area. And the course, we'll see how successful it was. There was a lot of enthusiasm from the business owners and other folks who were involved about how much they felt they learned from this, and it allows them to strengthen existing businesses and hopefully to get some new ones started. So I'm looking forward to following up on this with hopefully Community Capital will continue to offer the course to businesses here in Sleepy Hollow, as well as more advanced courses to folks who've completed the first round. And I think there's some other ancillary efforts that will help complement this as well. So it was a good thing this evening to see that happen. And again, I want to also thank our community liaison, Deanna Loha, for her work in helping to bring this about. She's been really terrific in this process. So again, congratulations to all of those business owners, to those students. Nice job. Mr. Giacchio, my apologies for
That's
the
okay.
interruption. Please.
Anytime. It's okay. So as I was mentioning, we had met with the fire department just before this meeting to talk about the LoSAP program. I think Trustee Gonzalez, Trustee Levy, and I met with them, and I think we made a lot of progress. We'll continue that discussion over the next few weeks, and where we're headed with that. Again, I thought it was a very positive meeting we had with them. This morning, I met with New York State Parks to discuss two matters related to the State Preserve. They want to tap into our water line. They want permission to do that. Right now, we're working with the engineers to see how we can accomplish that. As you know, the reservoir is on their property, one of our reservoirs, but it's a little more complicated than that, so we're working with them, and we would need the village board to authorize them to tap into our system, but we're working with them on that. The other thing they came to talk to me about was guidelines they're setting up for properties that are abut the old Croton Aqueduct. And what they're seeing is encroaching sheds and gardens and things like that are encroaching on the aqueduct. In addition, the view sheds are being affected, and invasive plants and those sorts of things. And they've come up with the guidelines. They have no authority to prevent these things from happening. It's the jurisdiction that the issues are happening in. So they appealed to us. So I'm going to refer this to Sean McCarthy and the planning board as well, to see if they would consider at least recognizing that the state has guidelines on what you can do in and around the old Croton Aqueduct, so that it's on their radar when applications come to them. I thought that was an important thing. We don't really think of that too much, but it is an important asset, recreational asset that we have up there. It is also a historical landmark. Couple other things. I do want to mention 3 water projects, large water projects that we're involved in. One is the UV connection that we did a capital project last year. That project is completed. We're just waiting on permits to put that in motion, and we're a little frustrated with the city on how long it's been taking, but as far as we're concerned, we did the project with Briarcliff Tarrytown, we're completed, and it was a successful project. Another project that's in the works, should be going out to bid soon, is the water line underneath the tracks from the east parcel to the west parcel. Designs have been done, they've been sent to the health department, and we expect to go out to bid over the next few weeks. The third project, and that one, by the way, was part of our capital plan. A project that was unexpected was the collapse of our sewer on Continental Street, which we're currently bypassing. We're working on designs to redirect that sewer, a fairly expensive project. We won't know until we finish the design and go out to bid. but that was an unexpected expense for the village, so I'll keep you posted on that. And finally, next week, we're going to host the Village Officials Committee, where it's our turn to host that meeting. We do it once a month. The Village Officials Committee is the 6 villages of Greenberg and the village of Sleepy Hollow. We meet monthly to talk about ways of sharing ideas and services. And just to give you an idea what we're going to talk about this month, we're going to talk about sharing recreation programs. I'm going to bring Matt Arone down, and we're going to talk about how we can do more of that. We're going to bring the assessor down, who happens to also be the assessor in Greenberg, and our assessor, and talk about lessons learned when they did the revaluation in Greenberg, and whether or not that makes sense for the village of Sleepy Hollow. And finally, we're going to talk about the Route 9 study, see what the other villages along the river feel about it and what they've done, whether they've adopted some of the ideas, none of the ideas, all of the ideas. So we'll pick their brain on that and see how that affects us. So those are things that we can really benefit from just by having this little consortium that we created several years back. And that's my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Giacchio? Thank you, sir. We're going to move on to a report from Chief Boetti from the Sleepy Hollow Police Department. Welcome.
Good evening. Hope we're all enjoying our wintry weather. I'll just get our analytics out of the way first.
We're thrilled.
I'm sure. It changed quick. So far, we've had 16,866 calls for service this year, 223 arrests, and 2,820 summonses issued for the year this far. Sometime this week, we'll be observing a lockdown drill at our Sleepy Hollow High School. I'm in the early stages of planning another training with Phelps Memorial Hospital. This one's going to be a bit larger than the ones we've done in the past, so we're actually targeting this time next year to get this drill together. It'll be a multi-agency response to an incident that takes place at that hospital. We had a school safety seminar with More School on the 30th, the day before Halloween, emphasizing be safe, be smart, be seen for Halloween safety. We also issued out glow sticks to the children so they could be seen at night. We had the 10K, hayride, and a football game Saturday before Halloween, which was, that Saturday night was probably the most people I've ever seen at a hayride event. It was absolutely phenomenal. Everything went well. The men and women that make up the Sleepy Hollow Police Department really stepped up for a long day's work, and they did it quite well. Quite well. New Broadway on New Year's Eve. Getting a little ahead of myself. On Halloween was, we shut it down, and we're a little worried about the weather, but it worked out. The weather really cooperated this year for all our fall events. And that one was just as busy as any other Halloween, maybe just ended a little bit quicker. I attended a seminar with the DA's office, myself and several other officers, in regards to the new bail reform and discovery laws. So we are quickly preparing for that, which is going to take place on January 1st. One other mention is the Sleepy Hollow Police Department and the Sleepy Hollow PVA are doing their first annual toy drive. So if anybody, you can drop off unwrapped toys for kids of any age, or you could donate money to the PVA via Venmo at Sleepy Hollow PVA, where they will then take the money and purchase toys to give out. Drop-off locations would be at 28 Beekman Avenue, the police department lobby, the Village Hall lobby on the second floor, or the fire department when they're open. Also, at 55 Elm Street, the senior center, they'll be accepting drop-offs, and 104 Spring Street in Ossining. There'll also be a location there.
We'll be distributing the gifts on December 23rd, where milk and cookies will be served, and there may be a special guest stopping by that day also to greet the kids.
How long is the toy drive going on?
It's going on, we'll be accepting until the 22nd, the day before.
Headless Santa Claus?
I thought it was an air.
Huh? No, I think we haven't done a headless Santa Claus yet, have we?
I
That might
don't
be
know
a
how that would
little-
go over with the
Okay.
attendees.
All right, some ideas. As soon as you say them, they're kind of like, no, that's not a good one. Okay.
And that concludes my report for a busy month of October.
It was a
Thank you.
busy month.
Thanks, Chief. Any questions for the chief?
So the toy drive is unwrapped? new
Unwrapped toys for children of any ages.
Any age, okay. And what about gift cards, like for older kids, that kind of thing? Are you thinking about that too? or-
I'm sure they'll accept them also.
Great. Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
All right, so we'll move on to public comments. Would anyone like to address the board? If so, please use the microphone in the middle of the room and be reminded that you're restricted to 3 minutes. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, trustees. At the most recent trustee work session last week, one agenda item for discussion was to amend the sidewalk cafe policy to extend the season for outdoor seating. Mr. Giacchio suggested that some restaurant has requested that the outdoor seating be extended beyond the dates of operation, which currently are April 1st to September 30th. I live at 11 River Street, which is a mixed-use condominium. The one commercial unit within this condominium is a restaurant that offers outdoor seating. I can only speak for my mixed-use building, and I can tell you that outdoor seating definitely disrupts the quiet enjoyment of the residents of the condominium, the village residents. 6 months of that disruption should entitle us to 6 months of quiet enjoyment. To amend the current code, extending the time period allowing outdoor seating would be unjust to any condominium owner in a mixed-use building who purchased their unit based on the existing codes, as I did. If the village trustees believe that there's a real pressing need to extend the time period allowing seasonal outdoor seating in mixed-use buildings, then any such amendment to the code should apply only to new construction of mixed-use buildings. Amending the code for new construction at this time would at the very least allow our future village neighbors to base their purchase decision armed with all of the facts, as I was. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Does anyone else wish to address the board? Okay, we're going to move on to resolutions. I pulled the first two resolutions, which would have been approval of our comprehensive plan, updated comprehensive plan, and our updated LWRP at the request of two trustees, and we will consider those again in 2 weeks at our next regular meeting, or it's likely that we will consider them for approval at our next meeting in 2 weeks. What I'd like to do is move R7, the resolution setting a public hearing for establishing of floating zones up to the first one. I had asked David Smith to stay, just in case there might be any questions that might come up about the resolution. So I'm sure you're fascinated to see the rest of them, but probably more interested in getting out of here as well. So with that, I'd just like to, if somebody could read the first one and so we could consider it.
Okay. Clinton, just the first page of this,
Oh,
I guess?
Excuse me, only the first page.
Okay, great. Resolution calling a public hearing on a local law amending Chapter 450 of the Code of the Village of Sleepy Hollow entitled Zoning to establish Strategic Property Redevelopment, SPR, Floating Zone. Be it resolved by the Board of Trustees of the Village of Sleepy Hollow that a public hearing will be held at 7 p.m. or as soon as such hearing may be called thereafter on the third day of December 2019 at the Sleepy Hollow Village Hall, 28 Beekman Avenue, Sleepy Hollow, New York, 10591, on the proposed local law entitled A Local Law Amending Chapter 450 of the Code of the Village of Sleepy Hollow, entitled Zoning, to establish a Strategic Property Redevelopment SPR floating zone pertaining to existing underutilized municipal properties in Sleepy Hollow. And be it further resolved that the village clerk shall give due notice of this public hearing in accordance with the village code and the provisions of the municipal home rule law of the state of New York. So moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, we needed to put that further out than normal public hearing. We did it 3 weeks, but if that lands on a work session, do you want to make it the 10th or is the 3rd okay?
No, I think the 3rd is fine.
Okay.
Starting a work session with a public hearing would
Okay.
hopefully make it a livelier work session.
Okay.
Right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? All right, the resolution's approved. Please get the notice out. Mr. Smith, thank you for your attendance.
Resolution of the Mayor and the Board of Trustees of the Village of Sleepy Hollow to approve contract for supervisory control and data acquisition system, SCADA. Whereas the Sleepy Hollow Board of Trustees is desirous of entering into a contract for professional services for evaluation, on-call maintenance, and troubleshooting of its supervisory control and data acquisition systems, SCADA, and whereas a supervisory control and data acquisition system, SCADA, is used by the Water Department to monitor the village's water system, and whereas Dolph Rotfeld Engineering has solicited proposals from companies to provide this professional service, and whereas Dolph Rotfeld Engineering is recommending Arcadis of White Plains, New York, to provide this professional service. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the mayor to sign the attached contract with Arcadis of White Plains, New York, to maintain the village's supervisory control and data acquisition system, SCADA, at a cost not to exceed $40,000 per year, subject to the approval of the contract by the village attorney. So moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? Resolution's approved.
Resolution calling a public hearing on a local law amending Chapter 362 of the Code of the Village of Sleepy Hollow entitled Streets and Sidewalks relative to sidewalks displays and sidewalk cafes. Be it resolved by the Board of Trustees of the Village of Sleepy Hollow that a public hearing will be held at 7 p.m. or as soon as such hearing may be called thereafter on the 26th day of November 2019 at the Sleepy Hollow Village Hall, 28 Beekman Avenue, Sleepy Hollow, New York, 10591, on the proposed local law entitled A Local Law Amending Chapter 362 of the Code of the Village of Sleepy Hollow entitled Streets and Sidewalks relative to sidewalk displays and sidewalk cafes. Be it resolved that the village clerk shall give due notice of this public hearing in accordance with the village code and the provisions of the municipal home rule law of the state of New York. So moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I just noticed it. I think if, after the quoted portion that reads sidewalk displays and sidewalk cafes, if we could accept one change, which now I can't find, I'm sorry, to change the period, change the period to January 1 to September, from January 1 to December 31.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And also, sidewalk is one word or two? We have it both ways in the resolution, so.
I only see it one way.
Isn't there anybody who got an 800 on their SATs?
I think it's one word,
Rochelle,
yeah.
It's
I
one
did it,
word?
But
Oh,
yes,
one
one word.
Okay.
Google it.
No, that's
It's
cheating.
one word in the code, so
Yeah.
it's one word for
Well,
me.
all right, so we'll change them both.
Yeah, we have to add "be it" in the last paragraph before resolved, right? All right, so where do we add the dates?
After the second correct sidewalk cafes, at the end of the quoted portion.
Okay,
The last.
right before the resolved.
Okay,
And be it further resolved, it should also be there, because we already have a resolved.
right.
So now that we've completely rewritten this one, who moved adoption?
I
Glenn.
did.
Glenn?
So the
As-
dates are now included after "and sidewalk cafes."
Yes,
And would you give me those dates again?
to change the period from January 1 to December 31.
From January 1 to December 31. Can I just move it with the additions that we
Yes.
just discussed?
That's
So
fine.
moved?
Yes.
Seconded,
Any discussion? It's moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? All right, Ms. McCarthy Tompkins, also get the notice out on that one, please. We're going in
Resolution.
any order that you want, so just pick one.
Yeah, resolution of the Village of Sleepy Hollow Board of Trustees declaring Arbor Day event. Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees, and whereas this holiday called Arbor Day was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and whereas the village board is desirous of continuing this tradition by declaring November 20th Arbor Day in Sleepy Hollow and by planting a tree to commemorate the occasion. Now therefore be it resolved that the Village of Sleepy Hollow declares November 20th, 2019 Arbor Day in the Village of Sleepy Hollow and urges all residents to celebrate Arbor Day and to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands. So moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
I just appreciate the minor history lesson that this resolution has, so thank you.
I had no idea it was that old.
I didn't either.
And we look a little paltry here. They did 1 million and we're doing 1.
Sterling Morton.
All right. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? Resolution's approved.
Resolution directing the village clerk to request certified copy of the civil service list for the position of Public Works Superintendent. Whereas the village board is desirous of hiring a superintendent of public works, and whereas such position is a competitive civil service position, and whereas in order to fill this position, it is necessary for the village to canvass eligible candidates from an active civil service list for this title. Now therefore be it resolved that the village board of Sleepy Hollow hereby directs the village clerk to request certified copy of the civil service list for the position of Public Works Superintendent from the Westchester County Department of Personnel. So moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed or abstentions? Resolution's approved.
Resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Sleepy Hollow approving the action of the Board of Fire Wardens. Whereas the Board of Fire Wardens of the Sleepy Hollow Fire Department at a recent meeting took the following actions. Dear Board of Trustees, this letter is to inform you of the actions taken by the Board of Fire Wardens as follows. On behalf of Columbia Hose Company Number 3, the following individuals have elected to active membership. Tristan Smutek, 37 Croton Avenue, Tarrytown, New York. Spencer Warnock, 11 Pine Street, Sleepy Hollow, New York. Lenny Rutigliano has resigned as an active member and as a fire council warden. He has been placed on our associates list. Captain Stephen Bencosme has been elected to fill Lenny Rutigliano's term as warden for Columbia Hose Company Number 3. Respectfully submitted, Board of Fire Wardens, Sleepy Hollow Fire Department. So moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? The resolution is approved.
Resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Sleepy Hollow hiring part-time recreation staff for the Recreation Department. Whereas in order to maintain the appropriate ratio of staff per participant in the after-school program, the current vacancy in the Recreation Department must be filled. And whereas the Superintendent of Recreation, Matt Arone, properly advertised this position and has conducted interviews and has deemed this applicant qualified, and whereas Mr. Rohn has recommended that this candidate be hired on a part-time basis effective November 5th, 2019. Now therefore be it resolved that the Mayor and Board of Trustees of the Village of Sleepy Hollow hereby approve Mr. Rohn's recommendation of Philip Burnett of Tarrytown to be hired effective November 5th, 2019 at an annual rate of $16.01 and be under the supervision of Mr. Arone. And be it further resolved, the background check for this applicant has been completed and is satisfactory. So moved.
Seconded.
And that was moved as an hourly rate, not an annual rate of $16.
Yeah, hourly.
Did I say annual?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Be nice to find somebody who's willing to work for that, who's not already sitting on this board, but,
Thanks for correcting that.
moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? The resolution is approved. I have two resolutions that I'd like to ask. One is, one of the trustees, Mr. Levy, is going to a training tomorrow in New Paltz, and I'd like the board to authorize a resolution covering the expenses of that trip. So if somebody could move to adopt, we're supposed to do this in advance of the trip. So if somebody could move passage of a resolution authorizing no more than $200 to be spent on,
Candy
all right,
and
210.
popcorn.
Mileage and admission.
It's, there's an admission
Travel
fee.
expense and
Tolls.
and-
It just expenses, what, yeah,
Yeah.
does, or
So
make it
moved.
250.
No
250?
speeding tickets, though.
Yeah,
Seconded.
Well, yeah, 250,
for
okay?
250, yeah, so
Okay.
moved.
Seconded.
Seconded.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or
Aye.
abstentions? Resolution's approved. There's also a grant, with the Hudson Valley, River Valley Greenway grant, and we need to actually approve applying for the grant before we can apply.
Mm.
So,
I got it.
great, thank you.
Resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Sleepy Hollow authorizing submission of grant application to the Hudson River Valley Greenway. Whereas the Village of Sleepy Hollow is applying to the Hudson River Valley Greenway for a grant under the 2019 Greenway Conservancy Trail Grant Program for the design of trail segments to be located in Sleepy Hollow extending the Riverwalk. And whereas the grant application requires the approval and endorsement of the governing body of the municipality in which the project will be located, and whereas the grant program requires a match equal to the amount of the grant, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Sleepy Hollow does hereby approve and endorse the application for a $40,000 trail design and planning grant under the 2019 Greenway Conservancy Trail Grant Program for design of the Riverwalk Trail segments in Sleepy Hollow, and authorizes the village administrator to file an application for such funds, and upon approval of said request, to enter into and execute a grant agreement with the Hudson River Valley Greenway. Be it further resolved that upon approval of the grant request, the Village of Sleepy Hollow commits a match in the amount of 50% of the approved project costs. So moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? The resolution's approved. That concludes our resolutions. Is there any old business or any new business?
I just wanted to add one thing. I got some notices on my doorstep and also mailed to me for Con Ed replacing a meter. I thought that I had completed a couple of meters in the last few years, so I thought it might have been an error on their part, but actually it's for an upgrade to your gas meter. And just to make people aware, because they replaced the gas regulators a couple of years ago, so. But I got a letter from Con Ed basically saying that I was gonna be charged $100 if I did not respond or I hadn't responded. So to make people aware, when I called the number, they said that they weren't charging anybody yet. It was just to get people's attention. So if anybody's listening and they've gotten one of these notices, you might want to follow up, because we have several meters in our houses now. We have water meters and gas meters and electric meters. But they want to read them remotely, so you know, they want to get this equipment in your house. So just to make people aware of what happened to me.
Thank you. Any other new business? Any communications, Ms. McCarthy Tompkins? I have one that was actually received by the clerk from our congressperson, Nita Lowy, for a proclamation from her office for Veterans Day, and it reads in part, whereas the people of Sleepy Hollow gathered today to recognize those who risked all to defend this great nation made strong by its diversity. And whereas we must never forget those who died in defense of the ideals of this country, and we must honor the commitment of those who serve still in their image and assure that they do not die in vain. And words that I think we can all agree with. I want to thank Mrs. Lowy for the proclamation, and also thank her for her service, as she's announced that she won't be running again. We will pass on this proclamation to our local veterans who put together that Veterans Day ceremony and observance. All right, are there any, does anyone wish to address the board at this time? Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and good night.